We have been videotaping these, and they are, if you have our app or you go on YouTube and put in Harvester UMC, the last two sessions are on there, and so will this one be. This one may likely be the last one, depending on if there's something more that we're going to talk about or that we need to talk about. We kind of left an extra one just in case. But we're going to go over quite a few things. By the way, I had a couple of folks bring in, and some of you noted, what's funny is when I sit in the back while the other people are up here talking, I hear all the little comments that are going on. That's not true, and all that stuff. She's full of it. I heard all that stuff. So, but there are, these are two of the living wills that you can get. I think most of you got one of them. If not, they're on the table. But these are two separate ones that are completely free. I know that if you get estate planning, it would be good to have the official copy, run through with your will and everything else, so that it's all in one place. But for right now, if you're waiting on that, this would be something at least to have in hand. And not all of them actually require a notarization. Some of them, just as long as they know your will or your wishes, that's the main thing. So tonight, I want to go over a few things in this one, and some would say that as I get ready to do this, that I'm trying to make my own job a lot easier. The funeral home says, do your pre-need and take care of your funeral for your family. And that'll help them a lot. And the will says, in order to take care of your family, you take care of that. That would help them a lot. This one's going to help me a lot. And it'll help your family as well, because there's still a lot of stuff going on. If you'll look at this sheet, I made sure everybody should be looking at for. This is the one that has the obituary information. This allows you just to keep up to date. And I was with somebody who said they filled it out, and in her case, her two brothers were down on the brothers, and so she had to point the arrow up to preceded in death. So she just kept marking it up and letting them know that, okay, I was the last one. But this is just the basic information that they need for the obituary. And in talking with a funeral home too, a lot of people will contact the local newspapers and get that put in. If you do it through the funeral home and they do it, they take care of it. They'll get it published and it'll go in the newspaper for you. And it won't cost you anything. So just to realize that. Obviously, at some point, all of us need to find that one good picture that looks pretty good, that we kind of like, and have that one kind of set off to the side for being the picture that we're remembered for. From your when you were 23 years old would be fine, and I think that's a good one. It's one of those things. A lot of people, we try to go back far enough so it still kind of looks like us now. So I'm completely with you on that one. But those little things, and so much of what we talked about is trying to help our families, because it's going to be tough enough for them anyway. Now, my dad was always one. He said, all right, when I die, I want you guys just to have a party. Don't do a funeral. Just go out and have a good time. To which I had to explain to him, sorry, Dad, some of us are going to actually be sad when you're gone. Yes. And you're not going to care anyway. You're not even going to be here. And so the funeral, as I had to explain to him, is not for him. It's for us. It's for everybody else left behind. So don't just try to make light of it and wish that we would just all go have a good time. it doesn't work that way just because somebody tells you that. And the reality is, in a good, and this will sound horrible, but in a good funeral, there is laughter, there are tears, there are great memories, there are new information, there is a connection that happens, and it should be filled with all of the emotions if there's a good funeral. If it's possible to have one of those, it's because everybody is experiencing everything. I want to reiterate and I hated being out and called away for a meeting down the hall, so I wasn't here last week, but just a reminder, you do not have to have a funeral as fast as possible. Fastest funeral I had was 2 days. They died today, and then the next day the funeral was happening, the next evening, and I'm like, there's no reason for that. You can take your time. In fact, in my druthers, mine is always going to be the next Saturday. Because I know a lot of people, they're going to need time to figure that out. There need to be people, and you're still going to have people who aren't going to come. But there are probably a lot more people that would love to show up. And if you give them a chance, it would help them tremendously, as well as your family. So realize it does not have to happen as quickly as possible. Now, having said that, I do know that funeral homes, they actually encourage that, because if you throw in a few extra days, they don't know how much is going to run into other funerals as well. So, but you know, once we've been embalmed, we can stay in the cooler for, you know, a couple months easy.
There are religions, I think, Greek Orthodox.
Yes.
It requires you to be buried within 3 days.
Within 3 days, yes. And we think that's well, and if you're Jewish, it has to be done before sunset on the Sabbath, and so, yeah. So I mean, it's just one of those things. Now, I've always heard bury it before sunset if you chop the rattlesnake's head off. You have to do that, but it's one of those things, old wives' tale. But with regards to what we're able to do today, there's no reason to rush. And I think I even mentioned last time the heartache that comes when people don't even find out about a death until, you know, after it's already happened, and they don't even get a chance to grieve. And so it really is a difficult time. So you have the obituary, which just kind of gives you an outline, and any of that information, because here's the other thing, and if your family puts the fun in dysfunctional like my family does, there's a lot not known about our family. There's a lot we never talk about. There's information like the statistics where, you know, who's who and what are relationships and people I'm still finding out I'm related to that I had no idea. And so if you've got that information, by writing it down, it will help everybody else. If you look at the next, and it's just a front side, it's called My Life Story at the top. I really want to encourage you, this is one of those mixed things as well. I can feel a sneeze coming on, so if my mic goes off in order to sneeze so I don't scare everybody to death, that's why. To go through this and think through your own life. Now, I know some of us will say, I don't even remember any of this stuff. It's been forever. It's okay. But if you have childhood memories, if you know, as time goes on, you start thinking about, oh my gosh, I remember we used to play out back at the tree, and we would play this game or do this, or we would go over to the cousin's house and we would always play hide and seek. I always went to my grandfather owned a 40-acre nursery in Clearwater, Sunset Point Road, and over there, and Sunset Nursery was what he owned. So when we would go with my cousins, we'd have 40 acres to go hide and play on. So we had a good time. We had BB guns and lizard massacres and all kinds of fun stuff. So, but anything that is especially a fond memory of yours, to encourage you to write that down. What kind of student were you when you were growing up? Writing that stuff down. Now, part of this, I'm going to invite you not only just to write it down for yourself and just to have for your family, but even to talk to your kids about it. Because so much, once we get adults, it's all about the kids' life. They never know anything about us. And it's one of the most frustrating things for me as a pastor is I sit down with the family and, well, she was nice and she was giving. I don't know, you got anything else you want to say about that? That's not enough. I need to hear stories. I need to hear times in your life, what happened, when, and I've done funerals where the whole thing was one story after another, and it makes all the difference when you do that funeral that people remember those things. And especially when you can tell a story that most of the family around can remember. I remember when that happened. So I've given you some areas here to awards you received. If you were in band and played an instrument, some of our kids don't even know that ever happened. If you played football or on any team, if you see your dating life. We love the stories where, my first person I dated, we got married and we're still together now. That don't happen very often, yes. And so, some of us have 37 that we went through to get to the right one, and then we had to divorce that one to find really the right one. So, just thinking through some of that stuff, highlights early on. Some of us have stories about our cars, about best friends, about things that happened. You have some of you smiling on that car thing. That's not the kind of thing I was going to share with your kids. Significant relationships, that your family members are extremely close. My family, we were never really that close. Whatever that was, to help us understand, because one of the things I do as a pastor when we're talking is, I ask the family, tell me what you want people to know about your loved one. Tell me some stories about your loved one that people should hear. I want to get people a sense, because, we do, and I admitted this, I think, the very first night that we were together, and that was that pastors, we had one class, not the whole semester long, one class on a funeral. And you think about the importance of a funeral and a wedding. And when I asked, are we going to talk about this stuff? These are kind of important times in people's lives. I was literally told, you can read, can't you? So they have little service books that they expect us to go. Anybody ever gone to a funeral that was about as impersonal as could be? And it's because we haven't been taught anything else. And I've even been to funerals where they didn't completely cross out the last person's name and ended up saying the wrong name. Exactly. So I don't ever want it to be that way. I like making the funeral as personal as possible. So remembering some of this stuff now, sharing with your family, what kind of work, career path you've had, military service. If you were married, tell us a story about how you met each other. Some kids don't have a clue how mom and dad got together. I've never heard this story. What do you remember about your wedding? Don't get too graphic. Where did you honeymoon? Those kinds of things. What were the main highlights you had to go through? And because all of those events define who we are. And what you see as you go through this is a pattern of the person that you really are. If you have children, what was special about their birth? In some cases, we don't have any children. In some cases, we may have even had some children who did not live, or who have passed on, or so forth. That kind of stuff makes an impact on who we are as adults, and so it's important that we, if you're willing to share that, that would go a long way. Your relationship with each child. Now, if you leave it up to the kids, they'll be able to tell you which one is your favorite. But now's your chance to be able to let them know that which one really is the favorite. No, to let them know just how special each one of them is. When you have been a parent, a grandparent, what struggles have happened, any major family vacations that just really set out was the greatest time that you've had, any of that kind of stuff. I'm gonna skip church for a minute. Lessons you want your family or others to learn. For some of us, we've learned some things, and I really wish my kids would remember this, that, or the other. There we go. Oh, take two. And so if there are things you really wish your kids would remember, or that you would like to say to your family and friends, funeral's a perfect time. In fact, I'll show it to you in a second, but I've even had, there's some people who do certain things that kind of mess it up for everybody. I had a father walk his daughter down the aisle, and as they were getting married, and he walked her all the way down, and who gives this woman to be married to this man? Her family and I do. And he stepped back, put their hands together, and then he prayed a prayer for his daughter to be a great wife. He prayed for his new son-in-law to love his daughter and to be the man that she is. And all the rest of the men in the whole congregation went, great, now I'm going to have to do that. Well, consider, even if, and we see this from time to time, people who will leave video messages because they know they have cancer or this kind of stuff for their kids. Writing a letter that you would like to have read at your funeral to your family and friends. You're not going to be there anyway, but you got a chance. That makes a huge difference. If I were, she said she wanted this read at her funeral, and so to her family and friends. Can be a powerful thing. I've actually got that written down for you when we talk about planning your service, so you don't have to write it down, but it is in there. Consider writing a letter to be read at your service. There it is. Another thing is collect all your assets, your policies, vital information. If you're like so many, we've got this policy in this drawer over here. We got something stuck underneath the bed cushions over here. We got one little lock box over here, and nothing is together. The problem is if anything happens to you, your family has to go digging through the house, and years later they're still finding stuff, or as some families do, they just take all this stuff and throw it away, and who knows what they're throwing away. So if you have it all together in one place, now if you go do your estate planning, they'll make sure you have it all in one place so that it's all there. But there are so many passwords that we have for email and this account and that account. If you can trust somebody that in case something were to happen to me, you could go into this place, all my passwords, everything, if I'm not here, that you could access it, would make a huge difference. And so that all this information could be all there in one place, and that would make a huge difference for your family. Yes.
Yeah, I heard good friends of mine from Guadalajara, Mexico. The lady was super rich. She grew the grapes for Pedro Domecq, the whiskey. Yeah, and she was very cautious with her things and her money. Well, a car ran through her, killed her, and they took 6 years for the family to be able to open her safety deposit box. It was so complicated because no one knew the combination.
Right.
So these things.
It's little stuff that you wouldn't think is that big a deal, and yet it is. Now, if you've got one place this is, and you know, it's only in case of emergency that someone would be able to have access
Yeah.
into that stuff, it really would make a difference. So any passwords and you know, having somebody you trust and just keeping all that stuff together would make a big difference. Because there are some people, like I said, you've got property, you've got if you've got savings accounts, if you've got any bonds, if you've got any you know, any of that kind of stuff. And that's the other thing, is making sure, because most of that stuff you have to have a certified death certificate to go talk to everybody. In some cases, in fact, somebody not too long ago ended up having to get 10 of them just for all the different steps that they were going to have to go through to get that. And again, that's stuff that you don't necessarily think about until it's too late. And if you're a kid who's doing this for parents and the kid has never experienced anything like this, they're so overwhelmed as it is, there are going to be things that are going to be forgotten. And so this is making it easy on them. Obviously there's information in here that would make it easy for me, but for the most part is making your family and to some extent even yourself have that peace of mind that everything's taken care of if anything were to happen. So that is extremely important. You see the church background on that same page, and we're going to talk about planning your service, especially if it is through a church. If you're able to talk about your background, when you grew up, if you went to church, if you didn't go to church, was there a time when you came to know Christ yourself? What was your involvement in the church? How important was faith in your life? And we're in a culture right now where faith doesn't seem to be all that important, or at least the church doesn't seem to be all that important. There are a lot of people that just, you know, if you ask me, I'll tell you I'm a Christian, but if you ask me any more than that, I don't know what to tell you. I will say that this is probably the most difficult part for me as a pastor. If a family does not know if you're a Christian. They can handle the overwhelmingness of everything else, but the one thing that will linger more than anything else is that question, I don't know if mom or dad was a Christian. Never heard anything, don't know anything, we didn't go to church, or he or she didn't go to church, and it really can bother some for the rest of their life. This will sound blunt. If you are, please tell everybody. Tell somebody, because it makes a difference. And if you're not, tell them absolutely you're not. And so that they know you're going to hell and it's fine. No, I'm kidding on all that stuff. But, you know, if you are, let them know. It makes all the difference in the world for family. Yeah.
I recently, this past year, had a earth-shaking experience. There was a lady that attended a Bible study in Tampa. I attended, and we struck a friendship. Well, she told me she was from Brooklyn, and her accent, you know, betrayed her and everything. And all of a sudden, she recommended me to my dentist.
Okay.
And I started going. One day, the Bible study group calls me that the lady had died. This lady had bladder cancer. She died during an operation. And we all were invited to her wake.
Mhm.
When I am new in the area, when I go looking for the address, it was a synagogue. And I said, synagogue? I went and my group was there. The lady had never told her family that she was a Christian. She was a Nicodemus.
Mhm.
And all the service was conducted in the Jewish fashion, extolling her as a Jewish, this and that. And we were smiling because we knew her. She was a
Yeah,
Christian.
she had the best of both worlds. So that does make a huge difference in just peace of mind. They can handle just about anything now, especially if they know they're going to see you one day. And so I just encourage you to talk about that with your family, and to be even bold enough to be point blank with other people in your family who you really don't know. I don't know. Okay, let's settle this right now. Let's talk about this so that I know what, and if you tell me yes, that's fine. You can lie about it. People do it all the time. But at least I'll feel better. Because we want to know. We want to know that everything's going to be okay. And, you know, we talk about peace of mind for all of this stuff, but there's no greater peace of mind than having that issue settled. And as a church and as a pastor, that is one of the greatest things I get to talk about when I'm talking with the family during a funeral is the hope and assurance that we have because of a person's faith. So questions about any of that? That's just meant to spark your memory, to write some stuff down, and or use it to just talk. And some of you would do better to stick the video camera in front of your face and just, read through this and just say it out loud, just so that your family hears the kind of stories. So much when we leave, our family really doesn't know a whole lot about us. We know a lot about our kids because it's always been about them, but they, in many cases, don't know a whole lot about us. And so I want to encourage you to think through that. If you pull out the sheet of paper that says planning your service, and this is not exhaustive at all, I just kind of gave some overview on this. If you have favorite passages, that's another question I asked the family. Did your mom, did your dad have favorite passages? Well, let them know what your favorite passage is. And why that's your favorite or one of your favorites. Now, 100 out of 100 is going to be the 23rd Psalm. Everybody loves the 23rd Psalm, but if there were other passages that were meaningful to you, what were they? If there were some that you want to be sure gets read at the service, what would it be? And so knowing that's another insight into who you are. You'll see favorite hymns there. I didn't put any songs also, but I grabbed a list of hymns that are there. But I did it my way. Any of that kind of stuff is fine. I will tell you when we've actually had a complete an Elvis funeral here, and that was not too long ago. And she loved Elvis and his gospel songs and so forth. So the whole thing was Elvis. That's not a problem with me. It is about it's about the person who died. And if you ever went to her house, she would have Elvis on. So it reminded you of her. And Elvis singing in the garden, it's okay. That's the other thing too, is realize that most funerals now, it's all about trying to have a sense of who the person was. I had one funeral, probably one of the more meaningful ones, that Grandma always had apple pie and coffee was on all day. You could smell coffee and apple pie. So we brewed a pot of coffee behind the casket so that you could smell it. You couldn't see it. And you could smell hot apple pie in there as well. So when people walked into the sanctuary, they immediately, it's grandma. So those little kind of things can make a huge difference as well. I'm all for trying to help the family, you know, have a true celebration of life. And so if there's little stuff like that, let's do it. You know, I always want to be the one to do that. So if you've got hymns you want sung, if there are, you know, go rest high on that mountain, you know, and good luck finding anybody but them being able to sing that song. And just letting them play a song during the time, completely fine. Nowadays, as you know, they ask you for about 35 different pictures of your life so that they can put together a slideshow. Well, how much greater would it be if you already had the pictures picked out of family and memories and all that kind of stuff, and you already had them set up and ready to go? In case of emergency or in case I'm gone, here's some things to go by. They scan those right in there, put the music behind it, and it becomes a great memory for them. Some of us collect poems as time goes by, and you know, some of us have collected other funeral bulletins and read some of those poems or some of those ideas, and it was like, that was very effective. Steal them, it's okay. I steal stuff all the time. It's the Jesus way. So we're helping one another through this stuff. So if you've got something you want read, then you know, either let it be read, let it be put into the bulletin, however that is. If you have a pastor or somebody that you want to lead the service, I do not get offended because someone says to me, we've got a minister in our family. Okay, good. Anything I can do to help out, because it's much better for the family if they have somebody in their family who knows them to be able to do that service. But if you know who you would like to do it, and I know things change over time, but as of the time you write this, to include that, if you wanted somebody in your family who you already know does a good job saying your eulogy, talking about your life, wants to do just a few minutes, you would like to have your son or your granddaughter or somebody. Now they may end up doing that, you don't even know about it, but if you already know that they would probably do that, you can let us know who that is as well. There's that whole idea about writing a letter to read in your service as well, and if there's specific people, the grandkids or whatever for pallbearers, again, those are just your wishes as to what you would like to have. And that by no means is the complete service, but it is helpful if we know if you've been in the military, if you're going to need taps played, if you're going to be going to the National Cemetery, Florida National Cemetery in Bushnell, those kinds of things that you get set up ahead of time as well. Questions, anything about the service? Okay, that was easy. I'm good. The last section, you'll see the little packet called Hope for Your Hurt. I've done a grief seminar a few times. And this is not only for perhaps you to look through yourself, but also something to keep in the folder with everything else so that your family, after your passing, is able to find hopefully some comfort in perhaps some of the stuff going on. One of the things you see there on that front page is, besides the definitions, but the 3 areas that are affected by grief. The physical reactions, and many of us know about those. The emotional reactions, and also the changes in behavior. And all of those things, please note down at the very bottom there, all of the above are normal reactions. There are people who say, I just can't sleep right now. It can be normal. I can't eat right now. okay? You've been through a huge loss. And there is a direct correlation between how much you loved that person who is now gone and how much you hurt. You don't love them that much, then you're not going to hurt near as much. I will say this, and I know it's online, sorry Mom. When my grandfather died, I didn't know my grandfather. He was never a part of my life. I had no clue who he was. So yeah, I was sad I didn't get to know my grandfather, but when he died, I wasn't as attached to him. Now, I've had members of the church that, you know, I've been closer to than anybody in my family, and when they've passed, I've had a tough time. And so there are all kinds of things that can happen to us, and realize everybody handles it differently. You got some people that if you're having a surgery, they want to be at the hospital. If you're going to die, if there's a possibility that something could happen, of course, you know, even tooth surgery now you can possibly die, I guess. But they want to be there just in case. You got other people, if that possibility's there, they're nowhere to be found. I don't even want to think about it. I don't want to hear about it. And there are a lot of times that people will say, well, you don't care about me. Well, that's not true. It's just they can't handle it the way other people do. And so we're all unique. But I do want you to look on the back side of that front page and look at some of the purposes for having a funeral. It is having a time for the family, and I will tell you, one of the most disturbing things for me as a pastor is how many people don't want to do anything for the person who just died. They don't want a memorial service. They don't want to get together. They don't want to do anything. And so our family has just decided to do nothing. Again, it's not for that person. It's for us. And there's a whole lot more going on. So it gives us the opportunity, first of all, to receive and express love, to show for friends and, you know, and church members and family members to come together to help those who are going through a tough time. For us ourselves to be able to express grief. It permits us the reality, and this is one of the things about the open casket. Because if the casket's closed or there's just a little jar of what I assume is Mom in there, and I never got to see her, and there's always something that's not settled in most people's brains. But by able to see her and see that it really has happened, makes a difference. It gives us an opportunity to gain emotional support, especially as we share, meets our needs theologically, in other words, trying to understand it and God's plan, and for us psychologically and socially. And so there's so many little things that happen with that. Provides us an opportunity to face our own mortality. And I'm reminded when we come together that, I'm going to be there one day. But not so much, I'm going to be laying in the casket one day, but for people of faith, you guys are going to have a tough time because I'm out of here, I'm going to be with Jesus, and I'm happy. So, you know, we need to think about that from time to time. It allows us a chance to say farewell through a ritual. Time for those less afflicted to give support to those who are most affected. Anybody been to a funeral where some people are just not handling it well? And then the other people come alongside them and just, you know, hold them or just let them cry. That stuff is so important to have that opportunity, because those people who are that affected are doing that at home by themselves more often than not. And so we need time to come together and to help one another. Number 10, it's a chance to reflect upon the memories of the deceased. This is oftentimes where some of the laughter can come in. It helps overcome feelings of loss and loneliness, because again, if I'm by myself, I'm going through this by myself, I begin to think nobody else cares and I'm the only one going through this. And as much as that's not true, when we come together, it makes a difference and reminds them Helps people deal with fear and panic and frustration and guilt. Helps us to establish emotional stability, and it's an affirmation of the uniqueness of who that person was. Now, there's all kinds of other stuff in this packet that I'm going to leave for you, including, on the back page, some questions to think through even for yourself, because for most of us, we don't get to the age we are right now without having suffered some loss. So though we're talking and thinking about our loss in this with wills and planning the funeral and all that other stuff, reality is we've also gone through some tough time. And so I've included this hope for your hurt, not only for you to be thinking through some things, but also to hopefully leave for your family so that they find some solace in the words that are there. One of the things I do know is that even in a class like this, or the times that we've had, we don't cover everything. Is there anything, any insights, because all of us come from different backgrounds, have had different experiences with things, that you would like to say to the whole group, to think about, or to ask questions about, so that we're all, because ultimately this is meant to be a time where we're helping one another through the inevitable. But is there anything that you want to share with anybody else? Okay.
Sorry, but when my mama died,
Go, you got it.
we
Okay.
were very close to each other, and when my mother died, I was not home. I was in Miami. She
Right.
was in San Juan. And I left shortly after the funeral. I just left. And I pent up my emotions. Then I was transferred to New Orleans, to Louisiana, and I cried every single night alone in my house. And then later on, many years later, 15 years later, I attended a grieving set of seminars, like 4 or 5, in McLean, Virginia. And that's when I learned that you have to talk to other people. See, I was venting up my emotions. Every time my family would call, my sister Connie would call crying, I would scold her and tell her, you don't cry, and I would hang up. I wouldn't deter her from doing it, because I was doing it myself.
Sure.
But I learned that you have to talk about it. You have to talk to strangers, to people in church. You have to vent your emotions.
You do.
And I was doing that. That was affecting my health too.
And nobody teaches you this stuff. You have to learn it the hard way too often. But it's a whole lot, you don't have time to make all the mistakes yourself. So it's better to learn from other people so you don't have to do it. Marcia?
Yeah, I just got a question. If, what you said about viewing the casket and things like that, what if you're going to be cremated, but you're going to have like your grandchildren and things like that? So what suggestions do you have to make that, final? Because they're not going to see the body.
Sure.
I mean, there'll be pictures, but not.
Well, and that's one of the things that I like about the casket rental cremation. And in all honesty, to have the full service, but then rather than go to the gravesite at that time, you then would just go and be cremated, so that, and again, the lining, and I could tell they didn't want to get into all the, and the way I was hearing that some people were trying to find out about the cremation service and at what temperature the body catches on fire and that kind of stuff. The inside of that casket literally is, there are cushions in there, but it's just cloth that covers all that stuff up. If you could pull the cloth off and look in there, it's a box. So, but allowing them to go through the full service, open casket viewing would be one of those things. Other than that, having good pictures around, being sure that they're on display so that though the ashes are there, they see lots of pictures. And they remember all of that stuff. The pictures are going to be the most important thing. Now, obviously, as I said that, in my experience, the things that helps the most is for them to be able to see and having the open casket and all that other stuff. The other thing, I've had people who have been eaten up by cancer, and families have said, "Oh, we don't want anybody to see her like this." But again, the family, the funeral directors are able to do some amazing things. They are able I won't get too awful about this, and I told them at the funeral home, I said, I want to know all about this stuff, but I don't want to know too much, kind of thing. But I know that in the embalming fluid that they use, they're able to put different colored dye in there to bring the skin tones back out. They're able to do things that you wouldn't think they could do. And so sometimes giving them a chance to let the family see the person after you're done before you make that decision. But if you're just straight cremation and that's how it's going to be, I would say get collages of pictures and have those ready to go, because they will spend time remembering all of that kind of stuff more than the other. Anybody else?
I'll say two things. The weekend, Russ and I both had funerals, and I was doing one for loyalists. I went and sat with the husband, and filling out this paperwork would be awesome if we do that for our kids and even our spouses, to have that done, because I went and talked to the husband, and all he told me about was himself. So then trying to speak about the woman who we were having the funeral for was really, really hard.
Yes.
And so I had to take what he told me and think how she might have felt or how she might have been. He went to Vietnam and got shot while he was over there, and she lost a child during that same time. And then he came home, got well, and they sent him back. Now think about, your husband's already been shot once, and now they're sending him back over there where, I mean,
Especially after
less than
losing a
half of
child.
the people probably came back from that war anyway. And knowing he's going again after she's lost a child and hasn't even had a chance to deal with that with him, and now he's gone again, and so I had to look at it, I had to try and be creative and look at it from her standpoint of what life must have been like.
Right.
Number two, my grandma and my great aunt, who are both deceased now, they love to quilt. And my grandma's casket on the inside was quilted. It's
Right.
actually, you can get, I guess, evidently buy a material, but it's quilted and it looks really, really beautiful.
They'll stitch it and do all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff, yeah.
And then, but for my great aunt, when she passed, she still had squares that she had never gotten quilted, and so they brought those, and that was something that each one of us could get to take home as a memory. But as you came in, everyone brought their blankets that she had made for them, and they lined every row going up was one of her blankets, and it was absolutely wonderful. And so, think about those things when you're writing down things. Hey, I love to quilt. My grandma loved to crochet, but if nobody knew that, we would have never talked about it. So,
Right.
So writing this stuff down, I think, is an awesome idea, and I'd never thought of it until we started this whole process. So I'm glad we have. Other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Kind of comments more. Another thing is that I don't think we talked about is if there's something that you want your family member to be buried with, or that you want to be buried with, they will put that,
They
it's
absolutely
fine
will.
with them
Right.
if you have that in the casket with them. They don't have any problem with that.
Including anything that grandkids if wanted to write a letter or draw a picture and stick it in the casket, they do that. And now, there is a keepsake box in the lid of the casket that is just a little drawer come out, and so you can place things in there and close it up. So, yeah, that's a great point.
Another thing is, because my mom is buried up in Bushnell, so,
Mhm.
and we just went through this about a year ago. They will not bury people up there on Saturdays and Sundays. They take the weekend off, so
Mhm.
those funerals have to be during the
Yeah,
week.
you do have to.
And
But I'm
then-
not in the military, so I'll never know.
The other thing about the obituary that we found out the hard way was that it's not free through the funeral home.
Okay,
She lived in Supper Hill, so to get it in the local paper cost us $83
Mm.
for the funeral home to call the paper and have it put in. Now, they had told us that, when we used to have a Tampa Tribune, it was cheap or maybe free at that point, but now that St. Pete Times have taken it over, I don't remember if it was $300 or $500.
oh my gosh.
So it's.
Well, that's the other
expensive.
nice thing about digital age that we're in. We can email that kind of stuff to people, but yeah, the newspapers in some cases $300 to $500 for an
Yes.
obituary. Holy moly!
Well, many funeral homes have it online too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You
No,
know
absolutely.
What the funeral home was.
If you know that
We
much,
don't live where we were born.
Right.
That was
and
Illinois.
most of us are so transient.
I've
We're
gone
not
to
where we
funeral
used to
homes
be.
there to get the obituary because I don't get a newspaper or anything from
Right.
them, you know.
Yeah.
This is a painful subject for me
Mhm.
to hear and to listen because I'm from the old country, Jamaica, and I've never seen really the great interest and the layout of the funeral
Mhm.
like I see here. Many things I told my husband, if I die, I don't want nobody to be viewing me. I'm dead already. I'm gone. I want to remember the good things about me, but don't prolong it
Mhm.
to him then. Because when my mother died, it was 7 of us, and all of us was away out of the country.
Mm.
And they called me and told me that she was sick, and when I went there, she was sick, but she wasn't dead as yet. She lived about 7 more days. And this night I went to bed with her, and I wrapped my body around her. And I said to her, she was moaning, I said to her, "Mom, are you afraid?" And she said to me, "Afraid of what, dear?" I said, "Are you afraid of dying?" And she said, "No, because when the good Lord ready for her, He will take her."
Mhm.
And I got up that morning and I remember giving her a little something to drink and bathe her.
Mhm.
And I went out on the porch and I came back and my mother was dead.
Mhm.
I said, "Dad, how can you die like this? I just talked to you."
Uh-huh.
And she was dead. She was gone. And I could never cry. I never cried until the body was taken to the church
Right.
a week later.
Yeah.
And believe you me, Pastor, I'm telling you, maybe I have all that piled up in me. I couldn't burst it out.
Mhm.
After the other kids that came from England a year and when they put her casket down into the grave,
Mhm.
and the first shovel of dirt that they put down until this day, it pains.
Sure.
I went deaf. I lost like 99% of my hearing. I couldn't hear nobody else. And from that day until today, my ears affect me. It's not getting better. It's not. Sometimes it feels worse, but
Right.
I'm trying to cope with it.
Mhm.
Sometimes I make a little joke with my families and say, "Do you think my mother boxed me?"
Yeah.
But no, you know, I have to laugh it over, and
Yeah.
I really enjoy all these things. I sit at my table tonight and read them,
Mhm.
read all about it, but I don't think all those things, to me, is necessary to go through.
And we're all completely different. If I still talk to my dad today, he still doesn't want us to have a funeral.
Yeah.
And again, you're gonna be gone, it doesn't matter.
He wants
It's
to
for
be
us.
He wants to be cremated, but I don't want to.
Well, let's
But
wait.
now I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to
We'll
learn to
have a
go
party
and
at your place.
stay on top of it.
Aware.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I will
Oh,
have
yeah.
to stay on top of it.
How long can he wait before he finds somebody else?
I,
No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. One thing I will say about that, and this is on that third page in that last grieving packet.
thank you.
The very first thing in there is, it is impossible to determine how much grief an individual has by simply looking at them. You can't look at anybody and tell if they're grieving or not. And you can't tell anybody how long they're going to grieve. And you really can't tell them they can't grieve. You're not allowed to grieve. I don't want you crying at all. It doesn't work like that. We're all completely different. And so we hope that they remember all the good stuff. We hope that they will get through it without a whole lot of pain, but we can't tell them to do it or to not do it. So, yeah, and just remember the funeral really is not for you. It's for us. And we need to say our goodbyes, and we need to remember, and we need to be together, and we need to celebrate your life. And so but if after all of this, you decide to, never get a will and never plan your estate, or just say, burn me up and just, toss me in the trash or something like that, and don't have a service. There are people who still do that kind of stuff. But it's a whole lot more important. You all are a whole lot more important to your family than sometimes we want to admit. And you got a lot of people who love you very much, and it's just trying to help them through it. Anybody else, Gail, do you have something? No. Okay, well, we're right on time, and so we won't meet next week. I will encourage you with all the information as you look through it, if it applies to you. What I gave you out tonight, it doesn't cost anything. The last two, you were talking about $2,800 and $5,000 and all this stuff. Mine doesn't cost anything, but letting your family know how much, your faith, and just trying to help them understand who you are is going to help a lot. Because you can't always assume that as Pastor Gary just pointed out, you can't assume your husband's going to take care of that for you, because he may only be talking about himself the whole time. Don't slap your husband. And so, make sure that people know your story. It is too important. Yes.
Okay, I would like to say that I think it's important that your family knows you're a Christian.
Yes.
But it's important to let your family know too, not just when you're dying, but
Yes.
all along.
Amen.
That your church is your family too.
Yes.
And that your church will be there to help through all this type of stuff.
Absolutely.
Down to the smallest detail, the church will be there for you. And I think a lot of people don't realize, a lot of people are surprised that your church did that.
Yes.
So I think it's important that we share that with our families.
And
now.
that can be a huge witness for the rest of the family, the way some of the church comes together. That's why when people come together for a funeral, that's why we want everybody who wants to help out with that service, we want them to help out. Because that just shows more the family that loves that person is involved, and you're in charge of you know, a congregational care and making sure that we have certain things for whatever kind of service it is. But we've got a ton of people in this church. They just want to help. They know the family's hurting. I want to be there. I want to help, even if it's putting ice in a cup. You know, anything I can do to help and to show, you know, how much that person meant, and that they did have a family here. We did love them as well. That is a great point.
I want to show her a big thank you for that.
Yes, yeah, we had with your mom not too long ago,
It was a
and
good service.
we loved her very
It was
much.
beautiful.
So, yes,
There's a program that's called Grief Share. I don't know
Uh-huh.
if you've heard of it. But it's across the whole country,
Mhm.
so another thing that, you know, that you could maybe tell somebody who is grieving or having a hard time is, because they come in from every state. you know,
Right.
When you get back to your area, look up on the computer, to find out where there's a grief share that you can go to, and it helps.
and so many resources out there nowadays, so yes, exactly right. All right, thank you all for coming out. God bless you, and hope all this stuff is put off for a long time. We don't have to worry about this, but in the meantime, let's get it taken care of. Thank you all. Drive safely.